The 2013 El Reno tornado is officially the widest tornado at a width of 2.6 miles. But did you know in 1999, another tornado was measured by radar to be over 4.2 miles wide? When I learned about this tornado, it got me thinking, what are some other historic tornadoes that for some reason have been forgotten over time? On April 12, 1945, 17 tornadoes would occur across Tornado Alley. Of the 17, only one would achieve F5 status, the tornado that went directly through Antlers, Oklahoma, killing 69 residents. Normally, a tornado event like this would garner national attention, but that was not the case. Standing President Franklin Delano Roosevelt would also pass on April 12, 1945, resulting in this prolific tornado outbreak to be forgotten. 2 years later, on April 9th, 1947, there would be 8 tornadoes, one of which was a strong F5. This tornado would track northeast at over 50 miles per hour, impacting the town of Higgins, Texas. It would continue northeast, crossing into Oklahoma, and would go right through the center of Woodward, Oklahoma, where it would do, by far, its worst damage. Across its entire life, this tornado was on the ground for a staggering 142 miles, killing 181 people, making this the 6th deadliest tornado in American history. On April 3rd, 1956, 35 tornadoes would form across the country, ranging from Mississippi all the way north to Wisconsin, but there would only be one F5 in Michigan, of all places. The Hudsonville F5 was an extremely photogenic but strong tornado, and despite happening in the 50s, there was great video taken of it. There would also be quite a few photos, which are some of my favorite retro tornado photos. The next year, on May 20th, 1957, 35 tornadoes would form in Tornado Alley. There would be 44 fatalities, and every fatality on this day was caused by the single F5 tornado, the Ruskin Heights F5. What made this tornado so prolific was that it went directly through the densely populated south suburbs of Kansas City. Many homes would be fully swept off of their foundations. What's crazy is how similar it looks to the 2023 Keota EF4, and I bet you haven't even heard of it. On April 11th, 1965, 47 tornadoes would form across the Midwest, but one tornado in particular would steal the show. This F4 near Midway, Indiana. We can see that it wasn't 2 tornadoes, but rather 2 giant subvortices within the same tornado. I wouldn't consider the Midway F4 a forgotten tornado, but I want to point out some of the other incredible tornadoes that happened the same day. To the west, the Wantagh F3, the La Paz F3, and this incredible shot of the Elkhart F4, which was extremely violent. And to the south, the Cambria F4 and Greentown F4. And to the north, this beast of a tornado in Branch County, Michigan. Also, this extremely iconic but somewhat forgotten photo of dual funnels from the Toledo F4. This entire day really deserves its own video. 1990 was an iconic year for tornadoes. There was the Plainfield F5, and in Kansas, the Heston-Gossel F5s. But there's another memorable tornado that doesn't get nearly as much attention, the Stratton, Nebraska F4. While this tornado produced extreme damage, the most incredible aspect can be seen from this further vantage point. This large wedge tornado was underneath a low precipitation supercell, which almost never happens. If we look at a map of all the F or EF5 tornadoes, there's one infamous spot in Moore, Oklahoma, where 2 F5 tornadoes crossed paths. I guarantee you've already heard of these 2 tornadoes, but did you know there's one other spot where 2 F5 tornadoes have crossed paths? In North Birmingham, Alabama, a spot that is far overshadowed by Moore, Oklahoma, but is arguably more dangerous because the 1977 Birmingham F5 was almost given a rating of F6 by Dr. Ted Fujita. On April 26, 1991, a wide-scale tornado outbreak would take place, the strongest tornado being the F5 that went through Andover, Kansas. You've probably heard of this tornado, but did you know about the Red Rock F4? Doppler radar showed it had winds over 260 miles per hour, and back in Kansas was the Winfield F4, which was a giant wedge. Thankfully, this tornado did not impact populated areas. On May 9th, 1995, a tornado outbreak would take place from central Illinois to Iowa. Just north of Springfield, Illinois, was this extremely photogenic tornado. What made this tornado so unique was that despite its strong rating, it was only a dust circulation. Normally, strong tornadoes have the condensation funnel all the way to the ground. But that wasn't the only relatively forgotten tornado on this day. To the north was another F3 near Walnut, Illinois. What made this one special? It was actually a twin, and what's strange is nowhere in the storm survey shows two tornadoes, making these forgotten twins. On June 8, 1995, a tornado outbreak would take place in the Texas Panhandle. One tornado in particular would go through a heavily populated area, the Pampa, Texas F4. This tornado packed a serious punch, tossing vehicles like toys, while easily shredding buildings to pieces. Considering how legendary this footage is, I wouldn't exactly call this tornado forgotten, but that same day, there were other extremely strong tornadoes that are almost never talked about. To the southeast, another storm would produce a long track F4 tornado. This footage here, captured by Bruce Hain, would show the tornado go from a multi-vortex tornado into this monster, which almost looks as if the entire storm's mesocyclone was on the ground. The same storm would produce another tornado near the town of Allison, Texas. The tornado would start out as a violent stovepipe, but would grow into this enormous wedge, which had the largest horizontal vortex I have ever seen. And what's crazy is I never hear anyone talk about this tornado. The next year, 1996, would be an above-average year for tornadoes, but there would only be one F5 in Wisconsin, of all places. This right here is the most iconic image of this rare Wisconsin F5, and it was taken by a dad as his kids watched in the bed of his pickup truck. The Oakfield F5 looks exactly like the 2014 Alpena, South Dakota EF4, and you're likely hearing about it for the first time. On April 16, 1998, a prolific tornado outbreak would take place. One storm in particular would dominate the atmosphere, producing multiple violent tornadoes, including one F5. The first tornado from the storm was this forgotten beast in Wayne County, Tennessee. The next tornado being the forgotten F5. Good Lord. Because this took place in Tennessee, where there's a ton of trees, you really only get one good look at this thing, but you can see just how strong it was. This tornado is legitimately called the Forgotten F5 by the National Weather Service, so I had to include it in this video. Even though this was a rare F5 tornado, it was most likely forgotten because it occurred in a rural area, and it was also overshadowed by another tornado that happened the same day, an F3 that went directly through Nashville. May 3rd, 1999 is a date that's synonymous with one tornado, but that was not the only strong tornado that occurred on this day. Way to the north was the Hayesville F4, which would track right through Wichita, Kansas. Back in Oklahoma, there would be another F4 tornado. This tornado would track northeast, nearly impacting the town of Mulhall, Oklahoma. And while its official width was 1 mile wide, the Doppler on wheels found the tornado could have actually been over 4 miles wide, making the Mulhall F4 unofficially the widest tornado ever measured by radar. And despite this being a record-breaking tornado, it was eclipsed by the Bridge Creek Moore F5. On May 22, 2004, another forgotten beast would be born. This tornado would track northeast and would reach a peak width of 2.5 miles wide near the town of Hallam, Nebraska. This tornado would hold the record as the widest tornado for 10 years until May 31, 2013, when the Reno EF3 would break the record at a width of 2.6 miles wide, overshadowing the Hallam, Nebraska F4. On May 4th, 2007, a nightmare scenario would take place. A giant tornado would go directly through the town of Greensburg, Kansas, destroying more than 90% of town. But that wasn't the end. The same storm would immediately produce another giant tornado, which was actually wider than the Greensburg EF5 at a maximum width of 2.2 miles wide. It's also speculated this tornado was stronger but never did EF5 level damage. On April 27th, 2011, there's one tornado in particular that doesn't get the recognition it deserves. This tornado holds the record for the furthest any tornado has ever thrown a vehicle at a staggering 1.7 miles. While this tornado was only rated EF3, don't be fooled. The new Ren EF3 probably should have gotten the EF5 rating, and if it did, this tornado would not be nearly as forgotten.